Merry Christmas from the Harper household of 2014. Now, today I'm not going to review anything nice and Christmassy because other than A Christmas Carol, I really can't think of anything else that would be suited. So I've decided to take the road far less travelled, and I'm going to review H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds. The War of the Worlds is one of my favourite books ever. Not simply because it involves an alien invasion, although, come on, that is a big draw if you want to read this book. But there are so many things going on underneath it in terms of subtext. And when H.G. Wells wrote it, he had quite a few theories in mind about what the Martians stood for. For example, this book was written as a response to the notion that there could be other civilizations living out in the stars. Back in the Victorian era, this was becoming a thing, alongside Charles Darwin's evolutionary theory. But additionally, the War of the Worlds works as a cautionary tale. At this point in Earth's history, the British Empire was a very strong and formidable opponent to anybody who tried to oppose it, but it wasn't invulnerable. And therein lies the overall message of the War of the Worlds, that overconfidence and overestimation can and will be your downfall. In the case of the humans in this story, nobody had even thought about life on other planets until quite recently. Everybody was happy to go about their own business and, living out their lives without even giving a second thought to intelligent life living beyond the world that they live in. And also the Martians themselves could be construed as a far distant relative to the human race. Why? Well, at the beginning of the book, the unnamed narrator says that the reason why the Martians came to Earth to unleash this calamity was because they had already sucked the life out of Mars. They exploited all the resources and it became virtually a drought. So the Martians set out to find other planets to gather resources, and it's hinted that the Martians have done this quite a few times over. They go to a planet, they suck it dry, and they keep going. Well, that sort of reminds you about how we as humans tend to work as a species. We will plunder natural resources and not necessarily give any thoughts about giving back to what we owe. So it is an unfortunate sort of truth, but you got to give kudos to H.G. Wells for bringing this to the fore in such a novel way. Now, if I really had to sum up this book in terms of the prose and the story, actually I'll just read two passages and then we'll talk about it from there. So here's the first one. Yet so vain is man, and so blinded by his vanity, that no writer, up to the very end of the 19th century, expressed any idea that intelligent life might have developed there far, or indeed at all, beyond its earthly level. Nor was it generally understood that since Mars is older than our Earth, with scarcely a quarter of the superficial area and remoter from the Sun, it necessarily follows that it is not only more distant from life's beginning, but nearer its end. And here's the second passage. Okay. And before we judge them too harshly, we must remember what ruthless and utter destruction our own species has wrought, not only upon animals, such as the vanished bison and the dodo, but upon its own inferior races. So yeah, that is essentially what War of the Worlds is all about. It's not a sensationalistic foretelling of doomsday apocalypse that involves extraterrestrials coming to wipe us out. It is a far more personal and intimate detail of human nature and how destructive it can truly be. As I said, the Martians could be seen as a distant relative to the human species because they themselves are very strong in number, but as individual beings they are incredibly vulnerable. When they are going around in their Martian war machines, they are indestructible. They can take down anything that is thrown at them with their unimaginable ordnance of weaponry. You have, for example, the heat ray, which, in a sense, prophesized nuclear energy. Think about that. The black smoke could also be seen as a sense of biological warfare, a dirty bomb. A lot in this story is eerily prophetic about how humans are able to dominate over each other and subjugate the world to their means. Yeah, in a sense, the War of the Worlds is highly cautionary, and you can't say that it is absurd. In retrospect, a lot of what is seen in War of the Worlds and what is written by H.G. Wells is eerily echoed throughout history to this point. It's quite creepy. Now, what I also like about the story itself is just how sort of contained it is. It is not seen through multiple perspectives as some speculative fiction can be, like say World War Z by Max Brooks. This is seen through the eyes of one man who has sort of been singled out during this juggernaut, this holocaust of the alien species. So he's experiencing it on a very personal level. He's not a soldier or anything like that. He is an observer. He is just a regular man who, despite his experiences, he is seeing a broader world because of what is happening. And you could easily transplant yourself into this role. You could be this person, this man who is witnessing all these terrible and messed up atrocities. When he sees human beings and horses and guns being melted by the Martian's heat ray, he is horrified, but at the same time he just can't immediately take his eyes off it. He has to force himself to run. That's exactly how probably you would be in that situation. Wells is very, very attentive to his stories and what they're about. And of course, it doesn't just go for the War of the Worlds. Like with The Invisible Man or The Island of Dr. Moreau, both of those stories maintain a sense of humans playing God and paying for their arrogance. Same thing with War of the Worlds. It is humanity thinking that they're at the top of the game, when really, they really are not. So, if I really had to sum up H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds in terms of rating, I would easily give it a 5 out of 5. It is compulsive reading. Whether or not you will enjoy it is completely left up to you, but if you can appreciate the themes in this story, and if you are able to see beyond the sensationalism that is written on paper, it is no doubt going to be a very pertinent part of your life. If you also get the blessing to the blessing and the opportunity to listen to Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, one of the best musical features based on the story. It is spectacular. I should really talk about this for a few moments, so please bear with me. Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds was the first major record that I knew of. I remember seeing the concept art inside of the LP. And if you see with LPs is that they were really big and they were very, very detailed. And in this booklet, the artist renderings of all this destruction brought on by the Martian war machine was ridiculous. And I mean that in a positive way. You'd see like little tiny details of people being, trampled by a running mob. You'd see dead bodies lying out in the street. It is such a visceral experience. And I mean that in terms of seeing the art as well as listening to the feature itself. Richard Burton voiced the War of the Worlds. Well, he played the role of the narrator. And you have several prominent British personalities voicing other characters, such as David Essex as the Artilleryman. The Artilleryman is a very interesting character in the novel and in the Jeff Wayne version, because at one point he is well out of his depth. He's like, we were wiped out. We were just wiped out. Like, he just can't believe it. But when the narrator meets him again, the artilleryman is so intent and so confident on starting again, and he has all these wild ideas about how to strike back against the Martians, like living underground, making weaponry, and using guerrilla tactics to bring them down. And yeah, they are very sort of lofty goals, but it just goes to show you just how humans would react to that sort of situation. Another really good character from Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, as well as the book, is the Preacher. The Preacher he sees the destruction of his people, and it drives him steadily insane. And eventually he compromises the safety of himself as well as the narrator, because both men are stuck in a house with a Martian war machine on top of it. So the Preacher starts to make a great big deal. He starts to go off his head, so the narrator has to kill him. So narrator strikes him down and sort of like hides in a sort of a coal stack, and a Martian probe comes in and starts to have a look around. And it's a really tensely written part of the novel. It's one of my favorites because you can just visualize it in your head. You can sort of see that the probe sort of snaking in, and it starts to sort of like sweep across the narrator's leg, and the narrator just is barely holding himself together, trying to remain quiet before the Preacher is drugged out of the house. It's cool. Oh, another thing about the Martians and how they might relate to humans in general is that when one steps out of its war machine, of course we know what ultimately beats the Martians is bacteria, the common cold. So when you see the Martian outside of this war machine, it's like a squid that's as big as a bear, big black beady eyes and a little beak, an earthbound octopod. And it is incredibly vulnerable, and it's always rather pathetic looking. But what these things need is human blood to subsist. And humans can be bloodthirsty by nature. Like, we can sponge off each other until we get what we want. It's a very disturbing part of the novel, just when the narrator sees some poor guy being fed on by a Martian war machine by sticking like proboscises into them, draining their blood out. It's horrifying, but it's just so compelling to read. So yes, 5 out of 5 for H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, and also 4.5 out of 5 for Jeff Wayne's The War of the Worlds. If you can pick up the Jeff Wayne's version with the concept art, it's one thing to look at it online. It's another thing to have it down in front of you so you can inspect it in your own time and just like not sort of squint at a screen. It's amazing. One of the best books ever written, and it's highly likely that's not going to change. So yes, Merry Christmas! And if not beforehand, I shall see you again in the new year, and thank you so much for tuning in. So take care of yourselves and each other, and I shall see you on the other side. Bye bye.